Colors. It's something that we all have and we all use for our painting. Essentially, it's what we use to paint, so logical we would have a lot. And we put a lot of thought and a lot of work into thinking what kind of painting scheme we want to have for our armies. But recently, as I was painting one of my current projects that I'm working on, I kind of made a stop and I had, a Netflix moment, and I wanted to go watch Netflix, and I stumbled upon a documentary by the great David Attenborough, and that documentary was Life in Colors. And this documentary actually opened my eyes to seeing the world in a very different way. The fact that we humans see color in a very specific way, as we know the RGB color, but animals and insects, now that's a whole different story. They apparently see in very different colors. I already knew that cats and dogs saw very differently from us, but I never actually thought about how the rest of the animal kingdom actually saw. Butterflies seen in the UV spectrum, birds as well, bees as well, and I saw a bunch of beautiful examples as to how the fact that the way we see a plant can seem yellow, but to a bird or a bee can seem a totally different color, and that attracts them, and that ties into the way they're living and how they sense stuff. And I found that very interesting. So when I finished watching this documentary, I thought about it and I said how I would like to incorporate that into my painting. And I do have the perfect army that would make the perfect subject to this kind of sort of experiment as to having some sort of UV painting scheme, and that was my sylaneth army. And on top of that, I do have 2 arch revenants that would have made the perfect model for this kind of painting. In most of the painting sets that we get, we do have some of the fluorescent colors, but most of us that have used it, they kind of really suck a lot. I used a few of them as part of my little project, but it was only just to accentuate some of the colors. But I also made a makeshift blue light, since I don't have a UV light myself, but I made a makeshift with my phone, and I just showed the example of how they look when they're shown through UV lights and how they kind of work. I started off by priming my Arch Revenant in black because I know I was going to go for kind of toned down colors by the end of this project. I know that fluorescent means that you have to be bright colors, but I decided to go more toned down. That way when I shined it with my makeshift light, it's gonna look a little bit better, at least in my opinion. That's the way I went with it. So I started off with just a purple, regular purple, just to test off the water, see if it was gonna look good. And in the end, I kind of liked it. I was very kind of careful as to how I was going to apply my coats of paint, but it went off pretty easily. I decided to start off with the wings first because I thought that was going to be my main centerpiece, since they were going to be the brightest thing. And when we do see butterflies, they're the ones that tend to be, the thing that catches your eye. So that's what I was going to start off with. That way when the rest of my model was going to just tie it up all together. But the wings, I wanted them to be kind of the centerpiece and the thing that was going to change the most. After finishing my layering of first purple, I decided to go over with some blue ink, just so I can accentuate it, add a little different color to the purple, make it more of a blue purplish color. And that was going to be my reference to how I was going to shade it up in the future. And once it was all dried up, the inks and stuff, I decided to go with my deep purple and just start off with the places that I was gonna do the eventual highlights on. And as I said, I wanted to keep it that fluorescent kind of color, so I did not want to overuse the deep purple. So I just put it right in the middle, right in the areas where I was gonna go over it again with a much lighter lighter purple, so I can keep that still muted colors that I was aiming for. And after going over with my light purples, I was gonna go also do some wet blending so I can keep that highlights and I could have that smooth transition between the blue and the purple that I had created, and it could still seem like a very unified color. And in the end, I was kind of proud as to how this ended up. Once it dried up the following day, it looked way much better. Here I'm showing it off when it's just, you know, still wet, but once I was finished with it, it was pretty cool. I really liked it a lot. It was the first time that I actually attempted to do some sort of fluorescent kind of thing, so in my mind it came out as the way I pictured it. After finishing with the little bug part of the wings, I decided to move out to the skeleton part of the wings, which is the outer part of the wings, not the little soft part. And I decided to go with a kind of a blue color. So what I did, I mixed my emerald from Vallejo and also a blue ink, the cyan from an ink from scale 75, so I can create this sort of kind of weird blend of blue, and I kind of liked it, and I just proceeded into putting just in the outer part. I did 2 layers of this because since I did add the ink, it made it kind of a little bit too fluid, so I decided to go for 2 inks. Also the black, since as I said I wanted to go for muted stuff, the black is very hard to cover, as we all know. So I decided to just go for it, go 2 coats, that way I have a peace of mind that it's a well established coat and it's a well thin, kind of even as possible coat that I could. So I go ahead and did all of that, and I also added my highlights, which was just to add a little bit of my another lighter blue that I had, which I forget the name of it, but I mixed it into my little mix so I can create the highlight. I did not want it to use white because it's it would have been too simple, so I decided to go more for like a lighter blue, and it gave it a nice little highlight edge to it. And I go ahead and did it for everything, and it covered quite nicely. Once I was done with the skeleton part of the wings, I decided to finally start off with the wing itself. And the previous day I had kind of taken a whole day just to figure out how I was going to come up with this light color, and I ended up mixing a yellow, a very light yellow, and a green from scale 75, and the other one was the yellow from Games Workshop. And here I kind of based it off of I saw a lot of pictures of butterflies, and I decided to go with the same kind of pattern. I did not want to just put a green wings, so I wanted to make like a little shape of it. So I just used the little net stuff that the wings have as kind of a guide, so I can know which to color green and which not to color green, because I was gonna color those other ones in a different color, so I can give it a little kind of a different kind of effect. And I also got inspired by some of the flower pictures that I had shown previously as to how to do this little shade to go from blue, green, and I ended up using a lighter blue. But for this it required at least a good 3 coats of paint, because the green that I came up with was a little bit too light for this black primer, so I used that also to make it a little bit more lively, because it did look too muted. Maybe here it kind of worked to my detriment, the fact that I primed it in black, but in the end I was happy as to how it came out. And to just add some highlights to it, instead of going for a lighter green, I decided to add just a hint of black ink to it, so I can work off on the edges, and it would have given a nice little highlight towards the middle, and it came out quite nicely. Being done with the green area part of the wings, I decided to proceed to go for a little light blue color, and for this little mix I added some of the MARKART blue from Games Workshop with a little bit of some green gray color from Vallejo. Since I live in France, the name is in French, it's called vert gris, so it's kind of hard to know which color is the exact equivalent to the English version, but I mixed those two colors and it kind of came off a little bit slightly lighter than what Baharat blue is like. So as the green was like, I needed quite multiple coats of this. For this one I was more free-handed as to putting the coats of blue, because here since it's just the bottom layer, I quite did not care to color in the lines. If I went over the green, that was okay, because it would have given it a little, you know, transitional kind of color between the blue and the green that I had. So I didn't mind going over the green, so I was more kind of happy about coloring this part that I didn't have to be so careful. And like I said, it was going to require a little bit more coats of paint, because I realized that priming in black was saturating my colors a little bit too much, and this is when I finally realized that I did have my little handle, but for some reason I never got it since I began painting it, so I decided to grab it for once and actually use it, and when it was just right there next to me. But in the end, this transitional color, it was coming out quite nicely, and in my mind it was quite perfect, and this is how I was picturing it, how it was going to be like. The fact that this is how I think for the sylaneth, that they see each other, just kind of like how insects see flowers in the world a very different color. I decided to add this little story to my sylaneth, the fact that maybe they don't see in the same spectrum that we see, maybe they see in a different color, and this is how he actually looks like in the world of the sylaneth. So I decided to just incorporate these colors into his backstory, or the backstory of the sylaneth. When all the colors were settled in, I decided to work on my body, as I was happy already with how the wings were looking at. I decided to just go over with it with a blue ink, as I said, since I already had primed it in black, as I had reiterated before. My goal was to make it as UV-like as possible, and I've seen in a bunch of pictures that the branches of like flowers and stuff always tend to have this like very dark blue, but like a very kind of specific kind of blue, and that's what I went for, and with the ink it gave it that sort of effect that I was looking for. Once my entire model was fully covered with blue ink, I decided to now go with my highlights for this body part, and all I did was, in this case, I did add more of my Baharat blue so I could, to the ink itself, so I could give it more of a brighter ink color, and that way it could give it kind of like this bioluminescence kind of look to the body part. And in the end it was coming out quite well. Sometimes it wasn't looking so great, so I had to go over it with another coat of that mix of the Baharat blue and the ink of scale 75, the cyan blue. So I decided to go over it with a little bit more coats on top of it, and it was just to work some edge highlighting. It tends to be a lot of tedious since the Arch Revenant does have a lot of raised parts, so it was quite tedious to go over all of them, but in the end it came out quite nice. It was coming out quite well, giving it this kind of bioluminescence kind of blue kind of color, and it was going quite well with the wings in the back. Once that edge highlight was done, I decided to go ahead and that same little mix of blue cyan and Baharat blue, I decided to make it even more lighter, so I added even more of the Baharat blue to it, so I can give it a more brighter color, so I can just give it a little tad more of a bioluminescence kind of feel to it, so that way it can go from a very dark saturated, not really saturated, but a very dark blue to a little brighter blue, and in the end having like if it was little parts shining. So I was just kind of like stippling on the side, and I was just giving it a little bit kind of texture to it, going for the parts that I thought was gonna, if it was in real life, that I thought it was gonna actually be showing a little bit of light to it. So that is how I was picturing my mind's eye, and in the end it was looking quite well. The final product was pretty nice. since right here it hasn't dried just yet. It still kind of looks rough on the edges, but once it was dried, it was gonna look quite amazing in my opinion. Being done with the body, I decided to follow it up with the little coat on the back, and I decided to use my 3 colors and go ahead and show you off how the end product would be like using these 3 colors. I decided to just go ahead and put it on the back. I was using a reference to one of the pictures that I saw of how the honeybees see flowers. For them, the flower is kind of reddish. I was trying to mimic that color. It was kind of hard to come up with that color itself. This was my rough approximation to how I think it looked like. As I said, it's pretty hard to replicate such colors since we kind of seen them in pictures, and we have this color. We have just a certain limitation when it comes to the paints that we have. I cannot come up with those colors. I'm not a really color mixing expert, so this is my closest thing I came up with, and I decided to just put it all over the model itself. And I thought that the red kind of complemented the blue and the green that I had put already for the model pretty well, since I was gonna stay basically with that painting scheme of using the greens and the blues as the main thing, and this was just going to be kind of like just something that could stand out. And I go ahead and proceeded to doing some of the edge highlighting for this, so I can give it more depth to this coat itself. So all I did to that previous mix that I had shown, all I added was just a little bit more orange, so it can just brighten up a little bit more. And the fact, as I said, and I keep on saying again, since I had primed it black, it gives it a darker color. So I'm quite happy that I didn't do some zenithal priming. Usually it's how I do it, but this time I decided to go for that, and it was kind of good for the coat itself. Well, not like how I went with the wings that I had to do multiple coats. Here it was just 2 coats maximum. And for my highlights, I decided to go even more on the edges. I added a little slight more orange to it, so it can be even more brighter. And I did add just a little bit of white, but I didn't even spray out any of the white paint that I had. All I did was just from like the cup itself, I just kind of with my brush I took it out and I put it in the paint, so that gave it a little brighter orangey color. And in the end, it did give that depth that I was looking for to give to this coat that it was gonna have. For the body of my Arch Revenant, I decided to go just straight out green. I thought it was going to be just a very simple thing, since in the lore wise, I thought to blend it more with the fact that Alario is from the world that was, from the Wood Elves, and when we think of the Wood Elves, we always think of green. So I decided, why not, since he is a Arch Revenant, he does come from the memories of Alario, of the world that was. So I decided to make his skin green. That is how I pictured he was going to look like, and that is how I pictured his real color to the other sylaneth was going to be like. I also, because I was adding too much blue, so maybe this was going to make the armor part of the body stand out a little bit more, so I just decided to go ahead and give it more green. And for the body, I did do some wet blending. And for this case, I did add a little bit of white to that green, so I can wet blend the lighter green with the darker green, so I can give some highlights to the body parts. For the rest of the body parts, I decided to go for a yellow ink from scale 75. Sorry for the sudden off-camera kind of painting that I was doing. Sometimes I forget where to place the model itself. But I decided to go for the green ink because with the black primer, it gave it a slight, since it's an ink, it's more see-through, as we know with inks. It still came off as more of a yellow green. It decided to come off more like a yellow green, so it kind of went with the whole painting scheme that I was going for. Some of the parts with the previous thread that I had used, I decided to put it in some of the, the little, what looked like little rocks, little emerald rocks. So I decided to put those reds in there. And for the shield, I also went for that green, since I thought maybe the helmet part was going to be also kind of like the shield. And as I also said, with some of the pictures I had shown previously, yellow is still seen by insects and butterflies and stuff, so I decided to keep yellow also to be there. At the same time, I wanted to just add a little bit green around the edge, not really the edge, but like the middle parts where there's the little crevices, so it can give off more kind of like an elf kind of thing, kind of elf kind of vibes, so that we know green and yellow would look kind of cool. And before this, I kind of did it off camera, but I had done a little bit some highlighting to the little lines of the wings to make it stand out a little bit more and to seem like if it was kind of like shining a little bit. And this was the result product of adding some of the greens to the crevices from the horns to the shield and stuff. And once the other parts were dried up, they looked slightly better than when they looked when I had just put them in. But for now, this is how it looked like, and I kind of left it there for a day so everything could just settle in and the paints could settle in, dry up, and looked quite nice the next day. Once all the paint has settled in, this is how the model looked the next day. And once everything had just settled completely and it was all dried, I haven't varnished it just yet, but honestly I am really happy as to how this little project of mine came out. And of course, this was not going to be the end of the video. I had a little of a surprise at the very end. But hopefully you got to enjoy this little slight tutorial as to how I came up as to paint this paint scheme, and as to the reasoning, my logic as to how I came up with this and the process that I went through it. Hopefully you got to enjoy it. If you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. Hopefully you get to subscribe to my channel, give it a comment, see what you guys think of my little kind of project that I did with this. I really liked it. Honestly, I liked it a lot, and hopefully you get to enjoy how this model looks like with my makeshift UV lights. Honestly, for me, this was the cherry on the top as to I was quite happy as to how my sylaneth came out when I finally put that UV light on it. Honestly, if this is how the sylaneth look each other like, that's quite cool. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Give it a like. Hopefully you get to subscribe, and remember, not everything is what it seems in the realm of Ulgu.